Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Newstos. And the Xbox Series just shocked the internet. It did beat out the PlayStation 5 in a very unexpected way, and even though I think that it's rather obvious as to the reason why, this is still very good news for the Xbox Series as we start to look into the bigger picture. So we will dive deeper into that here in a little bit, but also a big PlayStation 5 exclusive that's coming from a beloved studio might have just leaked out online, and I think that this one is going to make some of you PlayStation fans very, very happy, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that as well. Before we get started though, if you do find yourself enjoying the video, go and hit that like button below. It does help out the channel a ton. And if you're a fan of gaming and if you like to stay up to date with all of the latest gaming news, whether that be Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, PC, Stadia, Ouya, I don't really care what it is, I'll try to cover it. We just love games here, so go ahead and hit that bell notification and subscribe button below if you love games as well. Beyond all that, though, let's just go and jump right into the news, starting off with PlayStation Classics. They did just announce that classic PlayStation 1, PSP, and PS2 games will be coming to PlayStation Plus Premium, and that some of these games will also be purchasable without the need of a subscription. So all that sounds very good on paper so far, and especially as they start to expand this library even further as time goes on, I will be really interested to see what games they add in the near future, maybe something like Metal Gear Solid or Legends of Dragoon. Those would definitely be great additions, but either way, things just got even better for these PlayStation Classics as Sony Bend, the studio behind the classic PlayStation 1 game Siphon Filter, just revealed that it comes included with trophies. So there you have it. It looks like some, if not all of these games will have a new feature that they did not have before, and that is the addition of trophies, which is absolutely fantastic news. Now, I understand that not everybody necessarily cares about trophies or achievements, but there still are a lot of people out there that absolutely does. And with these classic games now offering trophies, that will legitimately be a feature that I think could be reason enough for some fans to kind of return to these games once again. I mean, this is a great way for some fans out there to kind of go back to some of their most beloved games ever made. Maybe you really like Siphon Filter, and maybe you want to represent that by doing something like collecting trophies, or maybe these trophies has you doing something in a game that you never really thought about doing before. It just really kind of adds a little extra something to these games, and I think that fans are absolutely going to love this. Now, it still kind of remains to be seen exactly how many of these games will include trophy support, but I'm kind of hoping that all of them will, or at the very least, most of them. Next up here, we get an update for Callisto Protocol, which is a game that we haven't heard much about in quite a while. This is a game that was originally announced a couple of years ago, and it drew a lot of attention because it's this high-budget horror game that almost resembles Dead Space. It almost seemed like it was inspired by Dead Space, and, well, in fact, it's actually coming from the creator of Dead Space himself, Glen Schofield. So it does almost come off as this spiritual successor, which is certainly exciting to say the least. A lot of fans out there do view Dead Space as one of the all-time great horror games. So here you have the creator working on Callisto Protocol. So yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of excitement. But that right there is kind of the thing. Outside of the small cinematic trailer that they originally revealed, we haven't really seen anything else on this game. But it looks like that's about ready to change. It has now been confirmed that Callisto Protocol will be on the cover of Game Informer next month, so you should expect some news there. But also, Krafton, which is their publisher, claimed on its financial report that Callisto Protocol is still targeting a second half 2022 release, and that apparently it's a quadruple A game, which might be a buzzword and everything, but more or less means it's got a big budget. If that is the case, though, and that it is releasing sometime in 2022, then we should get a gameplay trailer here sometime soon, and of course we do have the Summer Game Fest next month. So it is possible that we might see its big reveal there, and this really just kind of ramps up the anticipation even further for some of those June showcases. Really, though, it is starting to look like both Callisto Protocol and the Dead Space remake could possibly release within a 6-month period from one another. That's pretty cool when you start to think about it, and you Dead Space fans out there, yeah, you all have a lot to look forward to over the next year. Now also, Ubisoft is pushing out another quality patch that Game Pass subscribers are going to want to pay attention to, and that's for the Assassin's Creed franchise, this time for Origins. It has been discovered thanks to PlayStation Game Size looking through the back end of the PlayStation Store that Ubisoft is planning to release a 60 frames per second patch sometime next week. Now, Ubisoft hasn't publicly announced this just yet, but based off the patch notes that's been discovered, it will enable 60 frames per second on the PlayStation 5, and it will also add a new franchise menu. So this is a fantastic update for that performance alone that kind of emulates what they did for Assassin's Creed Odyssey just last year, where they did enable it to run at 60 frames per second on these next generation platforms, being the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. I mean, really, these games, they still do look good visually, and with that extra performance here, now they'll just kind of run the way that they truly do deserve. I think for console gamers, 60 frames per second has now become the norm, and at times it is kind of hard going back to something like 30 frames per second or when a game is highly unstable. So this is a very welcome update, and it's actually perfect timing because a lot more people will be jumping into Origins next month, as it's also slated for an Xbox Game Pass release in June. So great timing here on Ubisoft's part. Let's go ahead and talk about Xbox though, as they beat out the PlayStation 5 in a very unexpected way, and this seemingly shocked a lot of people online. So what's happening here is that for the first time in 8 long years, Xbox outsold PlayStation in their home territory being Japan. Yes, Xbox, out of all consoles, sold more on the weekly Famitsu charts, selling a grand total of 6,225 units between the Series S and the Series X. If you take a look here, you can see that the Nintendo Switch, once again, just absolutely dominated per usual, selling more than 60,000 units in Japan. That thing truly is just absolutely unstoppable over there, but the Series S did a very good job as well for the Xbox brand, selling 6,120 units alone. And then the PlayStation 5 sold 2,693 units between the physical and digital edition. So there you have it. The Xbox did, in fact, outsell PlayStation for the first time in Japan in 8 years, which is definitely very notable. Though at the same time, there was a reason for this, and that really simply comes down to stock supply. It is important to note that in the previous week, both PlayStation and Xbox basically emptied out their PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X stock supply, as the PlayStation sold nearly 50,000 units and the Series X sold 3,500 units, while in total with the Series S combined, it did sell 14,000 units. So you can actually see a major drop-off this week for both the PlayStation 5 and specifically with the Xbox Series X. However, this just once again kind of proves that the Series S continues to be an incredibly smart move from Microsoft this generation, as not only has it proven to be a popular choice among customers, but it's reportedly easier to manufacture, which allows them to keep up with supply, as we saw this week over in Japan. The other part about this though, and this right here is the bigger picture, this is still very notable that the Xbox Series outsold PlayStation in Japan, and that really just kind of comes down to their improvement in that region this generation. You have to keep in mind that the Xbox Series has already sold more than 200,000 units lifetime in Japan, and while that might be a small number in comparison to Nintendo and PlayStation, that is actually a significant improvement for Xbox. In fact, it's already basically doubled Xbox One's lifetime sales in Japan last generation. I mean, that's amazing when you start to think about it. The Xbox Series has already doubled their success from their last generation in just a few years. That is absolutely great to see, and it goes to show you some improvements that Xbox has made this generation. Of course, they do have a lot of studios now, and they're still trying to add Activision Blizzard, so we'll start to see some of that effort pay off probably around 2023 onward, but then they also have Xbox Game Pass, and that's a big selling factor as well. And that right there is kind of the thing, because if you look at Xbox and what they're doing over in Japan, it doesn't really seem like they're slowing down there either. And as I've said previously, this is great news for Xbox fans worldwide, because the more success that they do have in Japan, the more support Xbox will start to get from Japanese studios. And we are currently seeing that right now this generation with games like Danganronpa. They finally got Dragon Quest with both Dragon Quest XI and Dragon Quest Builders 2. Then there's Soul Hackers 2. That's coming out later this year. I mean, Atlas, they haven't always necessarily supported Xbox. And then there's also even smaller games such as AI Somnium Files coming over to Xbox. Now, I will say that I think Xbox Game Pass plays a major part there, but also the fact that they are doing better in Japan this generation, that can't be ignored either. Of course, their work isn't necessarily finished there just yet. There's still way too many Japanese games that does skip out on Xbox, unfortunately. So they still got to try and bring over even more Japanese games, but big congrats to Xbox for already basically doubling their sales in Japan this generation, and really big congrats for them kind of getting their first victory in Japan in 8 years over PlayStation. Now also, we do have some big PlayStation news as well, as it looks like a high-profile PlayStation 5 exclusive might have just leaked out online in kind of a bizarre way. This time, it's not coming from an insider or anything like that, but rather, this is directly coming from the game's actor, Norman Reedus, who of course is the protagonist of Death Stranding. Well, about that, he might have just let it slip out that they're working on a sequel for Death Stranding, as he said this in an interview with Leo Edit. We just started the second one. It takes a lot of work, and then the game came out, and it just won all these awards, and it was a huge thing, so we just started part 2 of that. So yeah, based off of this comment here, it basically looks like Norman Reedus just kind of leaked a Death Stranding sequel, which is kind of odd. You would think that he's under some type of NDA and that he shouldn't say anything about it publicly, but this is actually the second time he's made a statement like this. Last year, he kind of alluded to this possibly being a thing as well, but at the time, there was that Death Stranding director's cut, so some of us kind of assumed that maybe that's what he's talking about instead and just wasn't really referring to it the right way. But no, he brings it up here once again, and by all means, it's definitely starting to look like a very real thing. And I will say for myself, I am interested in this because, for one, I am a big fan of Hideo Kojima. I think he does a great job at directing his games. It's got a bit of a weird touch on it, but I think it's brilliant nonetheless. And even though Death Stranding, it's not necessarily a game for everybody per se, it can kind of be described as a walking simulator. Not everybody's going to want that with a big AAA game, but at the same time, I thought it had a lot of good ideas. The cinematics was, in my opinion, amazing. The world was absolutely fascinating, and it just begs to be explored. And also, the director's cut did show some big improvements over the original game. So I think Kojima has likely learned a lot from that first game, and now that it sounds like he might have a second chance at this, I think that he can truly take this franchise to the next level. I don't think it will be 100% identical with the original game. I think he might change some things up and really just kind of run with this franchise. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and see how all this works out and everything and get an actual definitive confirmation, and that might actually be a while. Based off the comments Norman Reedus is making here, it sounds like it's still early in development, so it might be a long while before we get an official reveal. Nonetheless, though, it does sound like Kojima Productions is rather busy as of recent. This is now the second game that they're rumored to be working on, as there's also talk of them signing an intent to work on an Xbox Cloud game, and then also, they are dabbling in working on film and TV as well. So they do seem rather busy as of recent, and that's actually good news for Kojima fans. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Are you looking forward to a Death Stranding sequel? And if you are, what would you like to see him do with the next game? Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though, and of course, the Summer Game Fest is taking place next month, and we are starting to hear about more and more of these events taking place in June. So far, the showcases that have been announced is the Summer Game Fest, which is taking place on June 9th. Then on June 10th, you have Geeked Week and the Tribeca Games Spotlight, and then on June 12th, you have the Xbox Bethesda Showcase and the PC Gaming Show. So these events are starting to stack up, and it sounds like we still haven't heard everything quite yet. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you all, now that we are starting to hear about more events taking place in June, do you feel more confident in the Summer Game Fest and it replacing E3? And actually, you all do seem pretty excited so far, with 57% of you saying yes, while 32% of you said no. And I am actually in agreement with you all here. E3 does have a very special place in my heart. It's that gamers holiday, and for years and years, I have watched and just absolutely loved E3. However, it seems like so far, they have scheduled the Summer Game Fest very well this year. Everything is just kind of condensed into that single month of the year being June. And it almost feels like E3 without the name. So I do like what they're doing so far here. Of course, we still got to see how they execute and everything. And, you know, one of the big questions is Nintendo going to be here, and is PlayStation going to be there? Now, I think that Nintendo, I've said it several times, I do absolutely believe that they will have a showcase next month. Sony, on the other hand, they're a little bit more unpredictable, but I am hoping that they will be there in June as well. But, I mean, nonetheless, we're getting a lot of these showcases condensed in a very short time frame. So it does seem like the Gamers Holiday is living on through the Summer Game Fest in 2022, and now we just kind of got to see how all this turns out. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.